The square-only format. Instagram launched in 2010 with one rule: every photo had to be a square, not a stylistic choice, a hardware limitation inherited directly from a phone that hasn't existed in over a decade. The original iPhone's display was 640 pixels wide, and Instagram built its entire format around that exact number because matching the screen width meant photos rendered edge to edge with no wasted space and no cropping artifacts on the one device the app was designed for. For 5 years, every photo, every grid, every profile on the platform looked the same shape. That square crop was Instagram's entire visual identity before aesthetic was even a word brands and creators used to talk about their feeds. Profile pages were uniform mosaics of identically shaped tiles, and scrolling through the feed had a specific rhythm to it that came directly from every post occupying exactly the same amount of vertical space. In August 2015, Instagram removed the restriction and added portrait and landscape support. The company's own blog post justifying the change noted that nearly 1 in 5 photos or videos people were already trying to post simply didn't fit the square format at all. People were actively fighting the constraint, awkwardly cropping panoramas, group shots, and tall vertical images just to force them into a shape that wasn't built for them. The signature look disappeared almost overnight. Brands largely ignored the new formats at first. Square still felt like the defining trait of an Instagram photo, and changing it felt like giving up what made the platform recognizable. It took years, well into the late 2000s, before portrait orientation became the format most creators actually default to today. This is the least talked about removal on this entire list, mostly because most current users joined well after 2015 and never experienced the square-only era at all, but it's the one original users from the platform's first 5 years mourn the most, specifically, because it's the version of Instagram that looked genuinely different from every other photo app at the time. And the removal is also the one most people don't even register as a removal because nothing about it ever gets framed as a loss. The chronological feed. On March 15, 2016, Instagram announced the feed would switch from chronological order to an algorithm. For the first 6 years of the platform's existence, your feed showed posts from accounts you followed in the exact order they were posted. No prediction, no reordering. What you saw was what happened. In the sequence it happened. The stated reason for the change, so users would see more from the accounts they actually cared about rather than missing posts buried under everything else that had been shared since they last checked. The backlash was immediate and loud enough that people started telling their followers to manually turn on individual post notifications for their account, just to guarantee they'd actually see updates, because the main feed itself could no longer be trusted to surface them reliably. An entire workaround culture sprang up around a problem that chronological order had never created in the first place. Instagram tweeted a response acknowledging the criticism. They did not reverse the decision. In 2020, when the same criticism resurfaced publicly, the company reaffirmed the algorithmic approach again rather than reconsidering it. Here's the detail most coverage of this story misses entirely. A chronological option did eventually return, but never as the actual default. It came back in 2022 as 2 separate tabs labeled Following and Favorites, accessible only by tapping the small Instagram wordmark at the top of the screen and selecting one from a dropdown. There is no setting anywhere in the app that lets you make either of those tabs your permanent default view. Close the app and reopen it, and you're back on the algorithmic feed by default every time, regardless of what you selected last. The part that makes this whole story land differently than a simple feature request timeline. It wasn't years of public user complaints that produced even this partial fix. It was a December 2021 Senate hearing on child safety and social media's impact on teenagers. Adam Mosseri, Instagram's head, testified under oath that the company was developing a chronological feed option, the same specific feature users had been publicly requesting since the day it was removed in 2016. 5 years of sustained public pressure got nothing. One congressional hearing, under oath, got a partial version delivered within months. The following activity tab. The Stalker tab. Introduced in 2011, this tab showed every like, comment, and new follow from every account you followed, updated in real time as it happened. It was originally pitched as a discovery tool, the theory being that you'd find new accounts worth following because your friends had already engaged with and validated them first. That was the intended use case. The actual dominant use case, by the time the feature was 8 years old, had become something else entirely. It turned into the primary tool for tracking specific individuals, watching in real time which posts an ex was liking, who they'd suddenly started following, exactly what time of day they were most active. The nickname it earned, the Stalker tab, wasn't an exaggeration or a joke. It was a literal, accurate description of how a meaningful portion of the user base actually used it daily. Instagram officially removed it in October 2019. Head of product Vishal Shah explained the decision by saying the feature was underused overall, and that some users had been surprised to learn their own activity was being surfaced this visibly to people who followed them. That explanation significantly undersells what the feature had actually become. This wasn't a quiet, low-traffic corner of the app nobody touched. It was a feature that had quietly enabled a specific, widespread surveillance habit across the platform for nearly a decade, and its sudden removal broke that exact habit for millions of people simultaneously, overnight, with essentially no warning beforehand. IGTV, the entire app that quietly disappeared. Instagram launched IGTV, along with a fully standalone companion app, on June 20th, 2018. It was positioned publicly as Instagram's answer to long-form vertical video, a dedicated home for content too long to fit naturally into the regular feed, and a direct attempt to keep creators from putting that kind of content on YouTube instead. At its peak, at most 7 million people had ever downloaded the standalone IGTV app, against a platform that had more than 1 billion total users at the time. That ratio on its own tells you most of what you need to know about how the product actually performed against expectations. There was a specific fixable design flaw that nobody addressed before the entire feature was eventually abandoned. IGTV's built-in search only ever matched against the uploading account's username. It never searched a video's actual title or written description. A creator could upload a perfectly produced, perfectly titled, perfectly described tutorial, and it would remain functionally unsearchable to anyone who didn't already know their exact account name in advance. Content on IGTV was nearly undiscoverable from the day it launched, and that core flaw simply never got fixed across the feature's entire lifespan. In October 2021, Instagram dropped the IGTV branding entirely, folding it into a combined format called Instagram Video alongside ordinary feed videos. The standalone app itself wasn't pulled from app stores until mid-March 2022. And even at that point, Instagram had initially told the public the app wouldn't be going away and would instead be rebranded, before quietly shutting it down completely just months later anyway. By July 2022, Instagram Video and Reels were consolidated yet again, and any video under 15 minutes simply became a reel by default with no separate category at all. The format Instagram spent roughly 4 years building, promoting, and trying to make competitive eventually got fully absorbed into the exact short-form video competitor it had originally been built to fight against. Like counts, the removal Instagram still won't fully commit to. Starting in 2019, Instagram began testing the removal of visible like counts for users in several countries, framed publicly as a well-being initiative. The underlying theory being that removing a visible, comparable scoreboard would reduce social comparison between users and the documented negative effects that comparison has, particularly among teenagers who use the platform most heavily. The global rollout that followed gave users a choice between 2 separate settings: hide the like count on your own posts so others can't see how many likes you received, and separately, hide other people's like counts from appearing in your own feed. Here's the detail that undermines the well-being framing more than anything else about this story. The feature was opt-in, not opt-out. The default setting for the overwhelming majority of accounts on the platform is still, today, to display like counts publicly exactly as before. Nothing was actually removed from the platform by default. An optional setting was added that the large majority of users never turn on, and most people don't even know it exists. Cardi B publicly pushed back almost immediately after the test was announced, arguing that hiding likes wouldn't address the actual underlying problem, and predicting specifically that it wouldn't reduce the volume of hateful comments that show up on major accounts regardless of whether a number is visible next to the post. Years later, that specific prediction has held up entirely. The feature exists. It's rarely turned on by the people it was supposedly built to protect, and the competitive anxiety around likes that the feature claimed to address never actually went anywhere. It was just made optional to see, not optional to feel. The founders who left right after. In September 2018, Instagram's co-founders Kevin Systrom and Mike Krieger both resigned from the company within the same announcement. Their departure came almost immediately after IGTV's rollout that same year, and only a few years after Facebook's 2012 acquisition of Instagram for roughly $1 billion, a deal that, at the time, was widely seen as Facebook simply buying a competitor and largely leaving it alone to operate independently. Reporting at the time pointed to mounting sustained tension with Facebook over Instagram's direction and the level of autonomy the founders still had over product decisions. Specifically, growing pressure from Mark Zuckerberg to reshape Instagram's priorities around Facebook's broader engagement and growth targets, rather than allowing Instagram to continue operating with its own separate product vision and decision-making process. This moment functions as the structural hinge point for everything that follows on this list. Every removal covered above the founder's resignation happened while the platform still had product leadership operating with at least some genuine independence from Facebook's core engagement priorities. Every removal that follows from this point forward happened entirely under direct meta control, where Instagram's product incentives were explicitly and openly aligned with the parent company's broader engagement metrics, rather than with any standalone product judgment Instagram's own team might have exercised independently. The pattern underneath all of it: look at the stated reason for every removal on this list, and a structure repeats every single time without exception. The chronological feed went away to help users see what they care about. And the algorithm that replaced it produces measurably more time spent per session than chronological ordering ever did. Because an algorithm optimized for engagement will always outperform a feed that simply shows you everything in order. The following tab went away because it was underused, and removing it eliminated a feature that was quietly competing directly with Stories for exactly the kind of obsessive, repeat-checking attention Stories was specifically designed to capture and monetize. Like counts went away for well-being, but only as an opt-in setting, which guaranteed the platform's core engagement metric was never actually put at meaningful risk at scale, no matter how the change was marketed publicly. IGTV's slow multi-year death cleared the runway completely for Reels, the short-form format Instagram actually needed in order to compete with TikTok before TikTok captured an entire generation's attention on its own. Even the Square format's removal, the one entry on this list that genuinely looks like pure user-driven product evolution, happened at the exact moment landscape and portrait content became necessary to compete with platforms that never had Instagram's original hardware constraint in the first place. None of these were ever framed publicly as engagement decisions. Every single one was described as being about user well-being, simplicity, underused features, or direct user feedback. And in every documented case, without a single exception, the framing happened to align precisely with whatever increased engagement, watch time, or adoption of the format Instagram needed to win in that specific moment. That's not a conspiracy theory, and it doesn't require assuming bad faith at every step. It's simply the pattern across every documented case in this video, and it has held for 15 years straight without a single counterexample. Instagram isn't the only platform that's spent over a decade quietly taking things away. Every feature Apple removed and never brought back explained. It's on screen right now.